My name is David Campbell. I'm 68 years old and have a memory that at times seems clearer than the days I still have left. Can I ask you something? Have you ever been treated like an intruder in a house that you once helped to support? I went, and it wasn't for lack of beautiful clothes, nor for delay. It was for something that many people forgot how to do it, helping those in need without expecting anything in return. I know what it's like to feel out of place. I know what it's like to be in a crowded room and still look invisible. Perhaps you also carry this feeling that no matter how much you have done, it was never enough. That all it takes is one detail, an outfit, a way of speaking, an address, to look at you from top to bottom. I understand. And that's why I want you to stay with me until the end of this story. Because today, I'm going to tell you about a night that started with contempt, but it ended justly. A night when a simple delay became the greatest lesson that rich family could receive. You'll understand why I left that house with my head held high, and why they were never the same again. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I was standing in the doorway of that mansion, my hands stained with grease and sweat drying on the collar of my older shirt. And when my daughter looked at me with shame, I almost turned my back. But it was at that moment, when the bell rang and the woman I had helped on the side of the road appeared before everyone, that everything changed. The silence turned to astonishment. The looks were reversed. And in that room full of money and empty of character, who else was ignored? It became the center of everything. If you've ever felt that your presence bothers you just because you exist, if you've ever been judged by your appearance while your intention was pure, this story is for you. And if somehow my voice has reached you, I beg you, stay with me till the end. If you can, leave your support with a like or subscribe here to the channel. It's not for vanity, it's for company, because telling it alone weighs, and each person who listens with their heart makes that memory hurt a little less. Thank you for being here. Let's move on. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the phone rang. I already had the newspaper open on the obituary page, not because I like it, but because, with age, we start to recognize more names there than at birthday parties. The cup of coffee already cold on the table, the noise of the street coming through the half-open window. I answered without thinking, and on the other side, that dry voice that I would recognize anywhere. Chase. David, how are you? So, we are organizing my mother's birthday dinner on Saturday. It will be at 7. At her house, as always. He didn't even wait for a response. He has already been amending instructions like someone who passes the shopping list to someone in the market. It's a more formal dinner, okay? Shirt, fabric pants, nothing much, casual. Oh, and try not to be late. Everyone will be there. Everyone. It was this part that kept hitting my head. I knew what he meant. Everybody didn't include people like me. Those Whitman family gatherings were always showcases of appearances, of fake smiles and empty phrases spoken by people who learned to hide contempt behind good manners. Since my daughter married Chase, it's been clear that my place there was a tolerated visitor, and only because I'm Ashley's father. I can't explain what hurt the most on that call, if it was the rehearsed way he spoke as someone who complies with protocol, or if it was the silence after the last sentence. Because he expected me to say no. He hoped that I would refuse, give some excuse, sparing him the obligation to see me among the porcelain guests. But I took a deep breath. I'm going. He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he replied with a dry, "Okay," and hung up. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The coffee cup was almost black, a cold puddle at the bottom. I took my wallet, put on my shabby jacket, and went to the downtown store to buy a gift. Marjorie Whitman, the birthday girl, is one of those women who never look you in the eye, just for what you wear, the car you drive, the last name on the invitation. She never liked me, and he never made a point of hiding it. The first time we saw each other, she squeezed my hand with 2 fingers and wiped it on my pants soon after. I was Ashley's dad, yes. But I was also the mechanic who fixed the brakes on the neighborhood car. Even so, that day, as I walked among the shelves of the store, I decided that she would have a worthy gift, not because of what she deserved, but because I still believed in doing the right thing. I found a beautiful wooden frame with carved details on the edges. You could put a big photo of the family. It was simple but tasteful. It cost $60. I paid in cash, without paying in installments. When I left the store, the November wind cut my hands. But inside me, the cold was different. And I found myself thinking, why do we insist on being where we are not welcome? Let me ask you something. Have you ever been to a place where you were put up with out of obligation and not out of affection? Ever felt that your presence was like a mistake in their scenario? If you've been through this, comment below with an "I believe" or "I've lived it." Sometimes, just seeing that we are not alone, the chest becomes less tight. I put the gift in the trunk of the car that night, still unaware that that simple gesture, buying a gift and showing up with respect, was going to turn the trigger of a storm that no one in that mansion expected. And that's when I realized it wasn't just a dinner, it was a test. But what I didn't know yet, it was the one who, in fact, was being tested. On Saturday morning, I got up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even warmed the window glass yet, and I already had the kettle on fire. I put 2 slices of bread in the toaster and stared at the closet where I still hung the blue shirt that Martha loved. It was the one she used to pass on Sundays, folded with affection, and said that she left me with the face of a respectable pastor. Since she left, I almost didn't wear that shirt anymore, but that day I decided to take it out of the hanger. I passed carefully. She still carried the light smell of the fabric softener she used. I put it on and looked at myself in the mirror. The collar was already a little worn, the cuffs starting to fray, but it still fit me. It was not a luxury, but it was dignified. It was the best thing I had. Then I took a longer shower, one of those that we wash even the sorrows without realizing it. I shaved, combed my hair back. I wanted to be whole for Ashley, even knowing that for many there I was never more than a name on the invitation list that no one wants to deliver. I took the gift I had already set aside, the frame I bought at the downtown store, and left it near the door. There were still a few hours left for dinner, so I decided to take a walk, get some air. I drove through the streets of the city with the radio down, only the background hiss keeping me company, and it was in that silence that my head began to pull memories. The first time I went to a Whitman family reunion, I remember it as if it were yesterday. It was some celebration, I don't even remember why, but everyone was there. And when I approached Marjorie, I reached out and said, "Nice to meet you, I'm Ashley's dad." She looked, hesitated, and only after a few seconds shook my hand. And he squeezed it with his fingertips like someone holding a dirty cloth. The phrase that came after marked me like a scar. Ah, the mechanic. That was not a question. It was a label. And from then on, every time I appeared at a celebration, it was as if I was invading a territory that was not mine. The smiles were short, the looks too long. They never asked me how I was, only if my car still worked. But I always was, because I believed that presence is a form of love, and because deep down I was afraid that my absence would hurt Ashley more than my presence would bother others. I took a deep breath when I returned home. I carefully folded the shirt and got it ready to wear later. I prepared the frame wrapping with neutral paper, discreet tape. He knew that this gift would seem small compared to the jewelry, expensive wines, and imported souvenirs they would exchange. But it was from the heart, and sometimes we have to make a point of continuing to be who we are, even though I know that this will not change anyone's view. The afternoon began to fall. The sky became half golden through the living room windows. I put on my shirt, adjusted my collar, put on my leather shoe, the only one that has not yet taken off the sole. I took the frame, locked the door, and went to the car. The old Toyota groaned a little to start, but it stuck, and it was there, right there, that something happened on the road. Something that delayed my arrival, but also something that would change everything that night. Do you believe that a simple stop on the side of the road can become the beginning of a major upheaval? That's that. Wait to see what happened on that road. It was there that fate began to write the most surprising part of this story. The road to Dublin was clean, straight, and the radio played a soft blues that matched the tone of the afternoon. I drove calmly, a little tense with the arrival, but trying to concentrate on the orange sky that painted the horizon. The city was about 40 minutes from home, and I left with enough time not to be late. At least, that was the plan. But around the height of Interstate 270, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes slowly. A car stopped on the side of the road, with the hazard lights flashing. It was a dark Mercedes, a new model, shiny, even dirty with dust. And there, standing next to the car, a lady with silver hair, light blazer, trying to talk to someone on the cell phone while looking, visibly distressed, at the open hood. Most cars just went straight through, but I couldn't. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of stubbornness. An old mechanic doesn't see a car stopped without thinking about what might be wrong. I pulled the Toyota carefully over to the side of the road, turned on the hazard lights, and got off. I walked up to her and said, "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I help with anything?" She turned around a little startled at first. Maybe because I was alone, maybe because I was wearing a dress shirt and shoes, but still looking like some old man in the middle of the road. But something in my tone made her take a deeper breath and nod. "I think it's the alternator." The car suddenly blacked out. "I was going to a meeting in Dublin," she said, in a firm but tired voice. I introduced myself. David Campbell. She smiled for the first time and replied, "Evelyn Brooks, a pleasure as far as possible." I laughed and went straight to the point. I excused myself, pulled over the car, and started to examine. The smell of hot metal was not deceiving. It was really the alternator. I stood there with the engine running, the sun hitting the back of my head, sweating slowly but without complaining. It was something I knew how to do. And at that moment, helping someone was more important than arriving clean in a house where no one would notice if I arrived or not. As I fiddled with the tools I carry in the trunk, because an old mechanic always has a screwdriver nearby, she struck up a conversation. She said she had been an executive at a large investment firm in Chicago, that she had been retired for 3 years, widowed for 2. She spoke of her husband fondly, of her children scattered across the country, and that she was spending some time in Ohio to visit her sister. I told a little about myself too, about the hands that no longer hurt because they got used to the pain, about Martha, my deceased, who was the soul of the house, and about my daughter, who now lived in a world that I could only reach from the edges. Evelyn really listened to me, not with that polite air of someone who is just waiting for his own turn to speak. She listened, commented, and we laughed as if that shoulder was a park bench and not the interval between 2 very different destinations. The connection was natural, effortlessly, as if life had stopped for an hour to remind us that sometimes what we need is not to arrive quickly, but to find someone on the way. I finished the repair with sweaty arms, the shirt now with a nice grease stain at chest level. She insisted on paying me. He said he had money there in his purse. I refused with a gesture. Some things we do because it's the right thing, that's all. Evelyn stared at me as if she hadn't heard this answer in a long time. He thanked me with a long hug, one of those that we don't expect to receive from someone we just met. Then he asked for my phone number, in case he needed help again. I wrote it down on a piece of paper and handed it in. I smiled, wished him a good night, and went back to the car. When I looked at my watch, I realized what I already suspected. I was 2 hours late. I thought about going home, shower, change shirts, but there was no more time, or I would go straight to, or give up. And I wasn't going to give up, even knowing what awaited me there, even imagining the turned faces, the tight smiles, the crossed comments. I started the car, took a deep breath, and continued my journey. But there was a peace inside me, a feeling that only those who do good without looking at those who can understand, because, as much as the night still had a lot to show, something told me that that stop on the side of the road was not by chance. And you? Have you ever felt that a small gesture can change the course of everything? That's that. Wait to see what happened when I got to that mansion. The dirt that was on my clothes. It was nothing close to the dirt that was in the hearts that awaited me inside. I still remember the feeling when I got back in the car after helping Mrs. Evelyn. It was as if time had run faster than I could reach. The clock was almost 7 o'clock at night, and dinner began. Well, it started at 7 o'clock. I was more than 20 minutes from the Whitman house, and with my shirt marked with sweat and grease, my hands stained and my face wet. Not from clean water, but from that sweaty fatigue that only those who live all day solving problems know. I started the car, took a deep breath, and stood there for a moment looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man who looked back at me was not handsome, nor elegant, nor young. He was a tired old man, but with steady eyes. I saw peace there, and that, at that moment, seemed more important to me than looking ready for an etiquette dinner. I thought about going home, taking a quick shower, changing clothes, trying to fix myself, but there was no time. And to tell you the truth, I knew it didn't do much good, because in that house no one was going to see my clean clothes. They were going to see my origin, my name without an important last name, my way of not knowing which fork to use, my silence in the midst of subjects that they find sophisticated. And you know what? I decided to face it the way I was, because if I came home, I would feel like they always wanted, inferior. But if I was the way I was, at least I would know that I was coming with truth, that he had done good, that even late I didn't turn my back on a lady on the road just to be punctual for us who didn't even want me there. I turned on the radio. An instrumental song played softly. I shifted into gear and followed the highway towards Dublin. The sky was slowly darkening, and the lights of the city were beginning to twinkle against the background of the horizon. And as I drove, I let my head fly a little bit. I thought of Ashley, in how she called me that week saying, "Dad, make an effort to come. Chase's mom will love to see you." I knew it was a lie. Chase's mom wasn't going to adore me. He never loved it. But my daughter was trying to keep both worlds standing, hers with her new family and hers with me. And I still believed that being a father was going, even when you are not expected. The traffic gave me a break. I arrived faster than I imagined. Their mansion was on a tree-lined street, one of those that even silence seems expensive. Iron gate, lighting in the bushes, garage with white marble. It was another world, a world where I didn't fit, but where, out of love for my daughter, I kept trying to get in without getting lost. Before getting out of the car, I looked one last time in the rearview mirror. I adjusted myself as best I could. I removed the excess grease from my hands with a tissue that I leave in the glove compartment. I applied my shirt to disguise the bigger stain. I took the gift, the frame that now carried even more meaning, and took a deep breath. I knew what was waiting for me inside. Twisted looks, fake smiles, muffled comments in the corners of the room, but I went anyway because I had done what was right, and those who live with a clear conscience, it even walks over Persian carpet. And look, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. There are things that time does not erase, but sharing with someone helps to carry. Now, are you ready to enter that mansion with me? Because what was waiting for me inside, it wasn't just contempt. It was something much bigger, something that none of them imagined would happen that night. Are you prepared to see how the truth chose the worst time, or maybe the best, to appear? I parked my Toyota right there, in the middle of those shiny cars that looked more like walking mirrors. Black SUV with tinted glass, imported sedan with headlights on, 2 or 3 electric cars with that glow of someone who has never seen a real road. Mine. Well, mine creaked a little when I pulled the handbrake, and it had a faded sticker from the shop where I'd worked for 30 years, but it never let me down. I closed the door carefully, picked up the package with the frame, and started walking to the entrance. The Whitman house was a monument. It had those tall white columns, polished stone floors, and a garden that looked like it had been pruned with a ruler. The front door had sand-blasted glass and 2 hanging light fixtures that turned on automatically when someone approached. And there I was, with the shirt crumpled from so much tinkering with Evelyn's engine, the shoes stained with dry earth, and the gift inside a bag that I tried to fold as beautiful as I could. I knocked on the door. It took a few seconds, and it opened slowly. The one who answered was Marjorie herself, dark wine dress, jewels shining brighter than the chandelier at the entrance. Her gaze came straight to my face, then went down to the grease stain on my shirt, stopped on my hands, which no matter how much I had cleaned, still carried the shadow of work, and returned to my eyes. Her smile was dry, pulled at the corners, almost a straight line. And then she said, in that sweet voice that cuts like a razor, 2.5 hours late, Mr. Campbell. What a triumphant entrance. I stood still, holding the frame tighter than I should have. I swallowed. I didn't apologize. I didn't justify myself. I just said, "Good night, happy birthday." She took a step to the side without saying thank you, as if opening the way for a delivery man. Entered. The house was huge. The floor glowed, as if no one had stepped on it yet. People's voices sounded low, full of difficult words and laughter that didn't match the tone. Everything there smelled of wealth and judgment. A man near the stairs looked at me with a furrowed brow. A woman next to the buffet squeezed her glass when she saw me. The smiles disappeared as I passed. Chase came soon after. Light grey suit, navy blue tie, hair combed with gel. He pulled me to the corner with that way of someone who pretends to be cordial just because he has an audience. "David, perhaps it would be better for you not to be too visible. It's just that the people from my mother's company are here. It is a more important event." Sophisticated. That hurt more than any slap. Not for the phrase itself, but for the certainty that he didn't see me as part of the family. I saw myself as a burden that Ashley had, hanging from her last name. I kept silent. I only looked at him with the look that age teaches us, the one who says everything without saying anything. Ashley appeared soon after, beautiful, elegant, but with her face torn between the love of a daughter and the shame of a wife. She hugged me quickly, whispered "Dad, sorry, Chase is nervous. The atmosphere here is kinda..." And he did not finish the sentence. I said everything was fine, because that's what parents do when they see their children trying to survive between 2 worlds. I went to the table, placed the gift with the others. There were boxes wrapped with golden ribbons, baskets of French wine, envelopes with spa invitations. My frame looked like a paperweight in the middle of a jewelry store. I sat in a corner. No one spoke to me, not even the waiter who served the drinks. I didn't need words. The silence said it all. I was a foreign body in that place, a reminder that not all the money in the world erases the roots from which we came. But still, I stayed, because as much as that room rejected me, I knew I had done the right thing on that road, and that no one there could take away from me. Now, you know that moment when all seems lost, when silence weighs you down and shame almost knocks you down? That's that. That's exactly when someone rang the bell, and what happened next. No one in that house would ever guess, not even me. The room was full, but the silence seemed greater than the number of people. The cutlery clinked lightly on the porcelain plates, and the glasses gleamed in the light of the tall chandeliers. With every step of mine, my eyes averted. I didn't expect smiles anymore, but I didn't expect so much ice either. I stood in a corner, trying not to take up too much space. It was as if my body had shrunk on its own, out of shame or out of habit. When the maid appeared and announced that dinner was served, everyone began to move towards the long table in the center of the room. It was one of those tables that looked like they were taken from a movie. Low chandeliers, lit candles, bowls in rows, places marked with fine calligraphy. Everyone settled slowly, commenting on amenities, whispering softly. As I approached, holding the frame in my hands as if it gave me some place in the room, Marjorie got up from her bedside, took 2 steps toward me, and said, loud enough for all to hear, "If you can't dress like a human being, then you can't sit at the table with them." The phrase fell like a stone in the middle of the party. The sound died. All that was left was that cruel sentence, suspended in the air, and everyone's eyes trying to pretend they hadn't heard. Nobody said anything. No one stood up. Chase looked away, embarrassed, but didn't open his mouth. Ashley, my daughter. She was standing near her place, teary-eyed, but motionless, as if she didn't know what to do, as if she didn't know which way to run. Her father or her husband? I took a deep breath. It took me a few seconds to answer. The hand trembled a little, but the voice came out firm. Some confuse clothing with character. That was it. That's all, because any other word would go down. I turned my back, took 2 steps, and pulled the car key out of my pocket. I was leaving, not out of pride, but because you shouldn't beg for a place where they don't want you. I was going to leave, without raising my voice, without causing a scene. I just wanted my peace back. But that's when it happened. The doorbell rang, a dry, simple sound, but one that seemed louder than everything that was said that night. Marjorie frowned, as if no one else was expecting a visitor. One of the maids went to the door and opened it, and when I saw who was there, my heart jumped. Evelyn, the lady I had helped hours before, standing in the middle of the road. But there, she wasn't just a lady with a broken car. She was wearing another outfit, even more elegant, with a pearl necklace and a serene smile. And behind her, a man in a dark suit and a younger woman, both serious, respectful. Evelyn looked inside the house and, when she saw my face, smiled, as if she had met me again after years. And there in that second I knew that night wasn't over yet. And if you've made it this far with me, listen to what I'm going to tell you now. The most remarkable moment in this story is yet to come. Because what she said when she crossed that door, everything changed, and he made every word of contempt spoken before choke on the throat of those who judged me. Can you imagine what she said? Well, prepare your heart, because what's next? No one in that house was ready to listen. When Evelyn crossed that door, it seemed the time had slowed down. Even the cutlery stopped clinking. She was impeccable, with a light grey dress, discreet and elegant, jewelry that shone without exaggeration, posture of someone who never needed to raise her voice to be heard. Her eyes swept the room, as if recognizing the environment and measuring the terrain. And then, when she saw me there near the door, still holding the car key and the crumpled gift wrapping, she smiled, a clean, sincere smile, as only good people know how to give. "Donald!" she said loudly, with that joy that warms your chest. "What a good surprise!" I still had my hand in my pocket, half hunched, ready to leave. The name she used was wrong. It was David, not Donald, but no one there noticed it. The important thing was the tone, and the effect was immediate. Chase turned pale, literally. The color disappeared from his face as if someone had pulled the blood with a syringe. Marjorie took a step back, almost tripping over her own ego. Evelyn looked around, as if realizing that she had arrived at a nest of snakes and understood, at a glance, that something very wrong had happened there. "You told me that the dinner would be for the family, for honorable people, for men of character." She turned to me again, and without losing her smile, said, "This man here took me off the road today. I was alone, scared, and he didn't just help me. He refused money. He said that kindness is still worth something in this world." Oh, the silence of the room turned into another type of noise, that discomfort we feel in our stomachs when the truth arrives without warning. Evelyn looked directly at Marjorie. "So, Did you humiliate the man who saved me today? Her voice didn't go up. He didn't have to. It was firm, straight, sharp as a good knife. And then it was as if everyone had been slapped with a glove. Chase stuttered something, tried to justify it with a, "Oh, we didn't know that." But Evelyn interrupted. They didn't know because they didn't ask, because they were too busy measuring his shirt instead of listening to what he had to say. She walked up to me, took my arm gently and said, "You're coming to sit with me, Donald. Today, you are my guest of honor." And there in that room that once swallowed me in looks of contempt, I felt the faces twitching, the glasses trembling in the hands of the arrogant. Ashley cried, not hiding anymore. Chase was still paralyzed. Marjorie. Oh, Marjorie looked like a pillar of salt melting inside. No, there are moments in life when the world turns its back on you, and you wonder if it's worth continuing to be who you are. But sometimes when you least expect it, life answers out loud in front of everyone. Yes, Valley, it's worth a lot. If you've ever been through something like this, comment here with a, "It's true," or a, "I know how it is." Because at these times, remembering that we are not alone makes all the difference. Evelyn guided me to the table from which they tried to exclude me minutes before, and there, sitting side by side, she made a point of toasting kindness. With a clear voice and a direct look at Marjorie, she said, "Elegance is not in the fabric of the clothes, it's in the soul." But Kai, it was not yet the end. Because what Evelyn revealed soon after about who she really was yet to turn the knife deeper into the pride of those who humiliated me. Can you imagine what she told at the table? Get ready, because the change of life, sometimes it comes in the form of absolute truth, and no one escapes it. Evelyn didn't need to raise her voice, nor do you point fingers. All it took was the way she walked around the room, the calm but accurate look, and the way the silence opened up around her, as if every word was measured with the precision of someone who has faced much worse rooms. She stood up, holding the glass of white wine by the stem, and spoke in front of everyone. Today, in the middle of the road, alone, in danger, no one stopped. No one has even slowed down. No one thought that a lady with a broken car deserved attention. Nobody except him. And he pointed at me without fear, without hesitation. This man here got his hands dirty for me. He was late for me. He treated me with respect, without wanting anything in return. And now I see that this was a problem for you. Chase tried to interrupt, half stuttering, in that way of someone who feels exposed. "Evelyn, please. There was a misunderstanding. He arrived late and maybe it caused confusion." But she raised her hand and cut it off. The only confusion here was thinking that etiquette is worth more than empathy. He turned to Marjorie and said, "You invited me to meet a family of values, but so far I've only seen facades, expensive coats covering vanity, polite conversations hiding arrogance." Marjorie tried to regain control, but it was too late. "Evelyn, if I knew who he was, but you knew, you just didn't want to know." It was like a sentence, and everyone listened. She turned to me again, came over, and, with a kindness that I have never seen in a place like that, asked, "Can I have dinner with you?" I couldn't say anything. I just nodded slowly. My eyes were wet, but not from sadness. It was a different cry. Relief, perhaps. Someone finally saw me. Evelyn sat next to me, pulled the chair elegantly, as if she already belonged there, but made a point of putting me in the center of the scene. The long table, which was once a symbol of distance, has become a stage for repair. The eyes that once avoided me now didn't know where to land. Ashley cried silently. Chase held the napkin as if it were an anchor. And Marjorie looked smaller than ever. Evelyn continued, "You know, Chase, when you showed me your construction company's project, you said it was about community, respect, future, and I believed it. But now I'm rethinking. Because if a company's values are a reflection of its leaders, maybe my money is better off elsewhere." Those words were more devastating than any scream, because it wasn't just moral, it was concrete. It was business. And in that world, few things hurt more than losing prestige in front of those who matter. Evelyn took a sip of the wine and continued with the greatest naturalness in the world. Character has no etiquette. He appears in small acts, in the moments when no one is looking. And today, it was not any of you who saved me. He was the man you ignored. Shame circulated like cold wind. Nobody said anything, and I, sitting next to her, felt as if the world had, for a moment, straightened out. It was there, at that table where I would not even have a place before, that I felt my dignity return. Not because I was defended, but because I was recognized, because someone with a voice decided to use it for someone who never had space to speak. And look, I've lived long enough to know that the world doesn't usually take this kind of turn, but when it does, we keep it in our chest as a rare gift. Now, do you believe that night still had more to reveal? What Evelyn did next, out of everyone's eyes, would still say a lot about who she was. And I would leave myself with a question that echoes to this day. Why did fate cross our paths just that day? After what Evelyn said, no one was the same in that room again. It was as if the air had changed direction. The forced smiles gave way to expressions of doubt. The whispers, once about travel and expensive handbags, now turned into anxious whispers. I felt the mood change, like someone who feels a cold front coming through the front door. Evelyn didn't raise her voice. He didn't need to. Her presence was enough. The way she slowly chewed the bread served as a starter, how she drank the wine without losing focus. Everything about her said that she was not there by chance, and the others knew it. One of the men at the end of the table, a tall fellow with silver hair and a burgundy tie, whispered something in his wife's ear, and she nodded with a sigh. I didn't hear, but I saw it, because I've been a mechanic all my life, and I've learned that what matters is not the noise of the engine, but the way it vibrates inside. And there, at that dinner, what vibrated was fear. The fear that this powerful woman, so respected in financial circles, would decide to turn her back on the Whitman family because of an old man dirty with grease. Evelyn wiped her lips with her fabric napkin, looked at me with that same gentle glow, and asked if I wanted to taste the house wine. I said I accepted it a little. And while she served, she spoke as if she was not being heard by everyone. Funny, right? In a room full of titles, the one who offered me help was the one who didn't ask for anything in return. I thanked him with a nod, without saying much. My throat was still tight. It was strange for me to receive so much recognition after a life where I was almost always asked not to get in the way. And look, I remained there silent, not for lack of opinion, but because there are times when the best response is the silence of those who know they have a clear conscience. Every minute, more eyes were turning to me, but now it wasn't the same kind of look. It wasn't that judgment disguised as etiquette. It was curiosity, restrained respect. Some even nodded to me. An older gentleman whom I had never seen even introduced himself with a shy handshake. James Stanford. I'm a partner in one of the construction company's funds. Nice to meet you. I answered the squeeze firmly, even without really understanding the reason. But I felt that in that gesture I had a kind of recognition. No, it was at that time that I realized something that I will never forget. It is not money that causes silence in rich rooms. It is the fear of losing prestige. And that night, for the first time, it wasn't the simple man who was trying to fit in the one who trembled. It was the owners of the Persian carpet, the inherited silverware, the cups that no one washed. Evelyn stirred the chalice slowly and with a faint smile said, "It's amazing how things reveal themselves when the varnish starts to crack, isn't it?" I just agreed, because that was exactly what it was. The varnish there had cracked, and underneath it, there was no nobility. There was insecurity, vanity, and a damned fear that the names on the invitations will disappear from the contracts as well. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Food was served. No one talked about business anymore. No one told jokes anymore. Evelyn remained calm, as if she already knew she had turned the tables. And Chase, with his spoon still in the air, was trying to think of how to fix what was already in pieces. But what he didn't know yet was that Evelyn wasn't done. What she said after dinner sealed the fate of that night, and he made it clear that true power is not in what we have, but in what we do with what we feel. Want to know what she did? So, get ready. Because there is revelation coming, and this time there will be no chair left for those who do not know how to sit with humility. Chase tried to regain control of the situation with that same smile he wore at condo meetings and in broker flyer photos. He raised his glass, as if he were about to toast with emptiness, and let out a, "Let's clarify this. It was all a misunderstanding." Evelyn put her fork gently on the plate, wiped her lips with the linen napkin, and said without raising her voice, but with a clearness that crossed every corner of the room, "You don't understand. I'm not here as a guest. I am here as one who has been helped by whom you have judged unworthy." The phrase fell like hot lead. Chase swallowed. Ashley lowered her eyes. Marjorie adjusted her scarf around her neck, but her hands trembled slightly. And then Evelyn dropped the bomb. "Before I came here, I was evaluating a $10 million investment in Palmer's new venture." The room was muted. I heard a glass being placed at the table in the back. Even the ambient music, quiet, seemed embarrassed. The gazes turned like a beam of light pointed at the stage. Palmer Whitman, the patriarch, owner of that mansion, who until then had not spoken out, perhaps thinking that everything would be resolved in the imposing silence, adjusted his glasses and tried to smile. "Why, Evelyn, let's not mix things up. You know our trajectory, our numbers. I can show you the new reports later today." She looked at him serenely. "Palmer, what happened here today is more revealing than any financial report." And that's when the real fear appeared. The one that is not fear of scandal, but of consequence. Palmer knew that if she left with the decision made, there would be no lunch, no meeting, no flattery that would reverse. He stood up slowly, picked up the bottle of expensive wine that had been a status symbol until then, and tried to serve Evelyn. "Please, let's toast to good coexistence, to learning." But Evelyn put her hand on the cup and refused. Good coexistence begins with respect, and that can't be bought with French Merlot. The room became unbreathable. Her every word cut like a razor. Chase tried to laugh nervously. Marjorie fanned herself discreetly. Ashley looked like a lost child between her parents. And I just watched. I still didn't understand why life had put me right at the center of that story. But I felt that something bigger was being sown there, right before my tired eyes. Sometimes the world turns in a curious way, right? It makes us spend our whole lives trying to prove our worth, and then, in a single gesture of unpretentious kindness, he shows who was really right all along. And look, if you think this story has already delivered everything it had to deliver, hold on, because what Evelyn did next, out of everyone's eyes, will show that the real turnaround was just beginning. Can you imagine what she decided to do with those 10 million? Well, save this question, because the answer will surprise even the most skeptical. Palmer stood up slowly, as if carrying his own empire on his back. His eyes, once filled with superiority, were now the eyes of a cornered man, a man who knew the size of the chasm about to open beneath his feet. He walked up to Evelyn with measured steps, tried to compose a serene countenance, but the hand that held the glass betrayed the trembling. "Evelyn, before making any decision, allow me to explain. This project will generate hundreds of direct jobs, revitalize an entire abandoned area. We have already been awarded 3 times for our sustainability practices. We have partnerships with universities, support from the City Hall. There's a lot at stake. Evelyn listened to him as calmly as before, but it was no longer an open listening. It was the kind of listening of someone who already knows what he thinks, is just waiting for the other to finish. Palmer continued, now with an almost emotional tone. I built all this with effort. Late nights, without inheritance, without pushes from anyone. I know I made mistakes. Who doesn't? But this company is the legacy of my life. And if it collapses, everything I've done so far will have been in vain. By this time, some guests were looking at their own plates. The shame of others was everywhere. Marjorie still remained rigid, as if she did not participate in the scene. Chase looked at his father as if watching someone sink and doesn't know whether to reach out or jump along. Evelyn put her napkin down on the table, crossed her arms, and turned her face slightly toward me. Her eyes fixed on mine, as if looking for something that would confirm what she already knew. Then she said, in a tone that sounded like a knife cut, "This man here, Palmer, stopped on a busy road to help a lady he didn't know. He was late, poorly dressed, and yet he put his hands in the grease without expecting anything in return. That's worth more, much more, than all the trophies on your shelf." The words echoed deeply, and for an instant, everything was suspended. Palmer tried to say something, but it didn't come out. He only nodded slightly, as if listening to the verdict of a lifetime. Evelyn didn't end there. He looked at the room once more, then spoke again, this time in a lower, colder tone. Every building, no matter how grandiose it may seem, collapses if the foundations are rotten. And today, I saw the cracks. The phrase entered the skin of each one as if it had been tailor-made. And I, sitting there, felt like I was watching the masks fall off one by one. Because, you see, there are things that money doesn't hide. When someone's dignity is revealed, or the lack of it, there is no expensive wine, award-winning resume, or illustrious surname to protect. Sometimes I think about how certain memories stick to us, right? There are things that pass and we forget the next day. But there are others that mark it as hot iron. Tonight, for example, I know it will go with me to the end. Have you ever experienced something like this? A moment that became a memory at the time it happened? Share it with me in the comments if you can. Sometimes venting a little is also a way to move on. Evelyn sat down again, took the glass, but didn't even drink. Palmer continued to stand, lost. And there, in that mute tension, a new question arose in the air. What would Evelyn do with all that power that was now in her hands? Because the night wasn't over yet, and her next step was going to say much more than any speech. While Palmer stood there, trying to pick up the pieces of his own authority, I sat quietly, as I had been all night. My plate was already cold, but I didn't even care. Evelyn still held the glass by the base, not drinking, only observing the subtle damage that her well-placed words had caused. It was then that, without looking at me, she said again, as if casting a light in the dark, "And he refused any payment. He said he didn't need anything in return." The silence returned like a wave. Someone sighed in the back of the room. Another shook his head, as if listening to something he cannot explain. And it was at that moment that I, for the first time that night, felt a duty to speak, not to defend myself, but to remember who I am. I looked up, looked around, and said slowly, "I don't help to receive something. I help because it's the right thing. Is that it?" The words came out simple, without flourish, but they had a weight that no defense of that family has been able to have so far. It was like throwing a stone into a still lake. Those few syllables generated waves that crossed each person in that room. I saw my eyes filling. I saw hardened expressions begin to disarm. I saw respect being born where before there was only judgment. Ashley, my daughter. She looked at me in a way I had never seen. It was a mixture of pain and tenderness, as if at that moment she had seen her father for real. Not the man who tried to fit in, nor the man who repaired cars in rural Ohio, but the man who chose to do the right thing even when no one was looking. And maybe she realized how much it hurt me to have been hidden, shrunk, molded to fit in a place that was never made for me. Chase looked away. Marjorie, who until then had maintained that haughty posture, tried to smile. A small, quick smile, but the kind of smile you get when you're cornered. No one reciprocated. Her mask no longer sticked. The authority in that room had changed hands, not by force, not by shouting, but by dignity. The table fell silent again. The waiter entered, hesitated, and left without saying a word. One or another guest cleared his throat. Evelyn then leaned over to me and said quietly, but in a way that everyone could hear, "That's why I trust you." I didn't know what to answer. I just lowered my head and thanked him with a slight nod. Because there are things that we don't answer. We keep it. And he remembers it forever. There, on that strange night at that dinner that began as a vanity parade and ended as an invisible courtroom, something had changed. And not just for me. I could feel that that moment would be remembered by everyone there. Because sometimes justice comes like this, in silence, without making a fuss, without getting on a platform. She walks in the door as if she wants nothing, and when she sees it, she's already taken her place back. But the most curious is that even with all this, Evelyn still hadn't had the final word, and when she got up from her chair and asked for everyone's attention once again, I knew that something bigger was yet to come. Can you imagine what it was? Well, prepare your heart, because what she said next, it wasn't just a choice, it was a sentence. Evelyn stood up with a lightness that only those who are fully aware of their own power can have. The conversations died instantly. The clinking of the cutlery ceased. Every glance in that room turned to her as if time had stopped for a second. "I want to thank you for the meal," she began with a biting serenity, "but I need to be direct with you. After what I saw here today, I have decided that I will not proceed with the investment in Whitman." A muffled noise ran through the room, a mixture of sigh and amazement, as if the ground had moved under the feet of those people. Chase widened his eyes, his face losing color. Palmer, still standing, let out an almost, "But please," who died in the throat. Evelyn went on as if she had been rehearsing it all her life. "My company only works with partners who demonstrate integrity, not only in numbers, contracts, and public speeches, but mainly in the way they treat others. Small attitudes reveal the big defects, and what I witnessed here today showed me more than any spreadsheet." Marjorie tried to intervene with that tone of someone who still believes she can conduct everything with social charm. "Evelyn, dear, let's talk calmly. I'm sure there was a confusion, something disproportionate." Evelyn interrupted her with a subtle gesture of her hand. "There was no confusion, Marjorie. There was clarity, a brutal clarity. You had a chance to show who you are when no one important was looking, and they chose cruelty. They chose contempt. They chose to shame a worthy man." Chase leaned over the table, like a student asking for more time to turn in a late assignment. I can explain. It was a succession of misunderstandings, misinterpretations. My father-in-law arrived looking different, and Evelyn turned her face to him and said firmly, "He arrived with dignity, and it was treated like garbage. There is no justification for this." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that doesn't weigh on the air. It sinks. It sinks inside people. I stood there, still sitting with my hands in my lap, without having to say anything else. Because for the first time, I wasn't the muffled voice in a crowded room. I was the mirror they were trying to avoid staring at. And that mirror now had the reflection of truth. Evelyn concluded with the same firmness she began. Businesses can be recovered. But reputation, once tarnished by disrespect and arrogance, it doesn't always come back. And that's a stain that I don't want to carry along with my story. That's when she took her bag, looked at me and said, "Donald, are you coming with me?" I'd rather end this night by having dinner with someone who knows the value of a clean soul. That dismantled me from the inside, but it also rebuilt me. I got up unhurriedly. The hall followed me with its eyes, but now it was no longer judgment. It was a mixture of respect and fear. Evelyn headed for the door. Before leaving, he looked once more at Palmer, at Marjorie, at Chase, and he said, "The numbers you lost today, they are not yet the worst. The worst thing is that now everyone knows who you really are." And then left. But what happened next, already outside that mansion, was what really sealed what that night meant to me. Can you imagine what Evelyn told me on the way to the car? Well, just wait until you hear. Because the greatest gift was yet to come. The air outside was lighter, but I was still carrying the weight of the night. Each step up the hall felt like another chapter closing. As the door to the Whitman mansion closed behind us, I heard the muffled sound of cutlery being put down, chairs shuffling discreetly, voices low, farewells murmured. No one else wanted to be there. What was supposed to be a night of celebration became an uncomfortable mirror, and those who looked at themselves too much did not like what they saw. Evelyn walked beside me in silence, a comfortable silence, one of those that do not need to be filled. I took the wrapping of the frame with me, still with the crumpled blue bow. I don't know if by instinct or stubbornness I refused to leave that gift inside, on that table where everything that was true was treated as an error. I stopped for a moment, looked at the package and thought about throwing it away, but Evelyn noticed. He lightly touched my arm and said, "Are you going to let me have dinner alone?" I hesitated. Really. For a second, all I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, lie down in silence. But then I glanced inside, saw my daughter still standing at the edge of the room, teary eyes, trying to understand what had just happened, and I realized that I needed to stay, not to confront anyone else, but to occupy the place that was denied to me for so long. I took a deep breath, took a step back, and came back with Evelyn. We entered again. The guests began to disperse like dry leaves blown by the wind. A couple whispered in the corner. A lady packed her bag in a hurry. When we sat down, no one tried to stop us. No one had the courage. The table seemed smaller now, less crowded but infinitely more human. Evelyn opened her napkin and placed it on her lap as if nothing had happened. I did the same. The plate in front of me was still there, cold, but in that instant, eating was no longer about food. It was about presence, about saying with my body that I was no longer afraid to take up space. Evelyn picked up her fork, tasted a small portion of the risotto and looked at me with a slight smile. Cold, but worthy. We both laughed. For the first time that night, I laughed lightly. On the other side of the room, Chase was collecting documents in a leather briefcase. Marjorie was still sitting like a cracked porcelain statue, beautiful on the outside, but about to fall apart. She looked at me, but didn't say anything. And I didn't say it either, because there are silences that say more than any speech. And look, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we will help another heart to breathe. So if this story touched you in any way, help me carry it forward. Like this video and subscribe. Not for me, but for everyone who was once invisible in a crowded room, because sometimes all we need is to know that we are not alone. We finished eating in silence, Evelyn and I. And in that gesture, in that almost symbolic sharing, something inside me settled. What was restlessness turned into peace. The frame I had brought was still by my side, intact. But now, it seemed to have gained another value. When I looked at her again, I realized something curious. Maybe she wasn't a gift for Marjorie, but for someone who really knew the value of a memory. And it was at that very moment, as the hall emptied and Dignity finally sat down at the table, that Evelyn turned to me and said, "Donald, can I tell you what I decided to do with that investment?" And what she said, it changed not only that night, but the course of my own story. Want to know what it was? So stay with me, because what's next? It's a new beginning. It was already dark when we left the Whitman house. The air had changed, you know. It wasn't just the temperature. It was as if the whole mansion had become smaller, colder, emptier. Evelyn said goodbye with a short, true hug. He said he would talk to me soon, that he had plans. I didn't ask which ones. It was not time. I said goodbye with respect, with that look that only those who have gone through a lot know how to offer. I walked towards my car, with the wrap of the frame under my arm, when I heard quick footsteps behind me. It was Ashley. She came running, like a child who was late to say something important. "Dad!" Her voice was already broken. I stopped. I turned around slowly, and there she was, her face red, her eyes watering, unable to maintain eye contact for more than 2 seconds. "Father, forgive me, for everything, for what I let happen, for what I didn't have the courage to prevent. I'm ashamed of what I did, or what I didn't do. I love you, and it pains me to know that only now have I been able to see the man you have always been." I was silent for a while, not out of anger, but because certain words, we need to let it land slowly. I looked at her, and what came to me was a phrase that I kept for many years. "Daughter, I didn't go. They never were." And that, for me, said it all. The pain I carried for so long did not come from my absence, but of their absence, of the lack of space, of listening, of acceptance. Ashley cried even more. He hugged me as if he was afraid that I would disappear. And I did, because there are hugs that we have waited a lifetime. She asked for forgiveness once again. He said he wanted to start over, that he wanted to have me around, really. No strings attached, no shame, no trying to mold myself to fit anywhere. "Give me a chance, Dad. Just one chance. I swear I understand now." I held her by the shoulders, looked her right in the eyes and said, "Daughter, I don't hold a grudge, but I don't pretend anymore either. I'll be around, yes, but only if it's real. I don't want convenience presents. I don't deserve this, and neither do you." She shook her head, crying even more. But there was already another cry. It was the cry of someone who realized that there is still time. And look, there are things that we think we lost, but deep down, we were just waiting to be rescued with truth. I felt, at that moment, that something was healing inside me. Not everything, because some pains are like scars on the bone. You learn to walk with them. But a part, yes, a part has softened. The part that's still expected to be seen, not as the father who repairs cars, but as the man who was always there, whole. Ashley wiped away her tears with the back of her hands and asked if she could call me the next day. I said yes, but only if it's to really talk, not to fill silence with politeness. She smiled through tears. "It will be, I promise." And then I opened the car door, sat on the seat, put the frame next to me, and took a deep breath. The world seemed different. Or maybe I was the one who had fit in again. But what happened the next morning, that took me by surprise. And it changed everything I thought about new beginnings. Want to know what it was? So don't get out of there, because what Evelyn did the next day, no one expected it. Me neither. The next day, very early, the phone rang. The number was not saved in my agenda, but I immediately recognized that firm and serene voice. It was Evelyn. "Donald, I accepted a piece of advice that I usually give to others. When you feel like you need to talk to someone, speak up. There is a cafe near my house, modest, but with an apple cake that saves any morning. Are you up for a coffee with me?" I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my flannel jacket, straightened my hair with a wet hand in the sink, and left. The cafe was in an old neighborhood, with those corners that still have a pharmacy with a glass window and a newsagent on the sidewalk. I went in, and there she was. No heels, no heavy makeup, no gestures that are used to impress. Only her. He smiled and stood up to greet me. I thought we deserved to end that night with a good coffee, cold or hot, but dignified. We sat at a small corner table near the window. I asked for black coffee, so did she, and a piece of that apple cake she praised so much. And look, It was not an exaggeration. We started talking, not about the Whitmans, not about business, but about the voids that remain after people leave, about the loneliness that arrives disguised as routine. She told me about her husband, a public school teacher who died 8 years ago. He said that he also had strong hands, the kind that carry the world without saying a word. He said that he never knew how to wear a tie properly, but he knew how to calm a student just by looking. And suddenly, it was no longer a conversation, and it was a shared memory. It was pain that does not weigh when it is shared. I talked about Martha, of how she combed her hair, listening to the radio, of how she left the coffee heating up in the coffee maker just to wait for me to wake up, of how the silence of the house became noisier after she left. Evelyn listened to me as if she already knew me, and not with that air of pity that many have when they hear stories of older people, but with respect, carefully, with presence. At one point, she held the cup with both hands, looked right into my eyes and said, "Donald, I've met a lot of men with money, but almost none with decency, and yesterday, when you got up from that table with dignity, I saw what the world tries to hide, the value that you can't buy. That dismantled me from the inside, because it's been a while since I've heard something like that, and even longer than I believed I was worthy of something like this." She made no promises, no insinuations. He just said, "If one day you want to have another coffee, call me. No rush, for no reason, just to share the silence if that's the case." And then we toast, not with goblets, but with the steaming coffee cups. We slammed the edges with a soft tin and smiled, because sometimes life rebuilds itself like this, with an apple cake, an honest conversation, and someone who finally sees you as you are. I left that coffee lighter, not because everything had changed, but because something inside me finally got right. But little did I know that coffee was just the beginning of something even bigger. Do you want to know what Evelyn revealed to me when we saw each other again, days later? I swear, you won't believe it. The road back to Columbus was nearly deserted that night. That kind of emptiness that only those who drive alone after a day that turns the world upside down know. The lights of the streetlights passed quickly through the glass, creating that hypnotic movement that always made me think too much. And it was like that, between one lane and another of the highway, that the memories of that day began to settle inside me, not like a weight, but as a revelation. I had my hands firmly on the wheel, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't coming home defeated. On the contrary, I was coming back in one piece. That dinner at the Whitman mansion, which had everything to be another chapter of swallowed humiliation, ended up being the scenario where I found myself again. Not because we screamed, not because there was a scandal, but because the truth presented itself naked and raw, as it always does when we least expect it. And look, I've lived long enough to know that life has these ironies. Sometimes the punishment of others is not even the most important part. The real turning point is to remember who we have always been, even after a lifetime of being pushed to the edges. While driving, I thought a lot about Evelyn. In the simple way she held the cup of coffee, in the sincere way she spoke of her husband's decency, and in the way she looked at me, as if she were seeing something in me that I had forgotten myself. I also thought of Ashley, in that hug, in that request for forgiveness, that I waited for years without even realizing that I expected. And I realized that despite the wrinkles, the calluses, the losses, I still managed to surprise myself. I could still feel my heart growing instead of shrinking. In the middle of the road, without witnesses, I said quietly, "Martha, you would have liked it." And when I said that, I felt something warm in my eyes. It was not sadness. It wasn't painful nostalgia. It was something else, something lighter. As if, for a moment, Martha had sat there in the passenger seat, making that soft noise with her tongue that she made when she agreed with something. I ran my hand over the empty bench with affection and smiled. The house appeared in the distance, with those dim lights that I always left on before leaving. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and stood inside for a few seconds. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It was a good silence. One of those who seemed to say, "You did what you should." I took the frame from the bench, that gift I had bought so carefully, who went through the humiliation, the shame, the turnaround. Now he was back with me, but different. It seemed loaded with another symbolism. Before it was a gift to please. Now it was an object waiting to gain a new meaning. I entered the house, the floor creaking according to my steps, as always. But this time, the house didn't seem so empty. Maybe because I wasn't going in defeated, cowering, erased. I was entering as someone who finally understood that he doesn't need to diminish himself to fit into anyone's life. I placed the frame on the kitchen table. I kept looking at her and thought, what photo do I put here? I didn't know. Maybe a picture of Martha. Maybe one of Ashley's when she was a child. Maybe one of the coffee with Evelyn. Or maybe one that I would still take. One of those that life surprises when we stop hiding. I closed the curtains, turned on the lamp and sat in the armchair where I used to nap. But this time, I didn't doze off. I just stood there, breathing. Because the silence that used to be loneliness, now it was peace. And little did I know, while the house finally rested with me, that what Evelyn had to tell me would still be the most unexpected chapter of this story. Can you imagine what a woman like her could still reveal? Well, wait for the next part. Because life, my friends, had not yet given its last gift. You know, looking at everything that happened after that night, I realized that life has a curious way of arranging things in the right place. The Whitmans, well, each of them went their own way. Chase, Ashley told me months later, lost several important clients after the story ran through Dublin circles. Marjorie is hardly seen at social parties. They say that her face has never been the same since the embarrassment. And old Palmer, the one there, finally understood that character cannot be bought with money, nor is it built with concrete. Ashley, my girl, took courage. She left her husband, went back to school, got an honest job, and over time returned to being the daughter I recognized in my eyes. As for Evelyn, we remain friends. A quiet, beautiful, unhurried friendship. From time to time she calls me for coffee, other times just to ask if the day is good. And I, who had come to think that my world had shrunk too much after Martha left, discovered that it could still open up. Today I live lighter, not because I won anything, but because I stopped carrying what didn't belong to me. And if there's one lesson that this day taught me, and I hope she finds a little corner in her heart too, it's that we never lose by doing the right thing. It may hurt at the time, it may seem like the whole world is telling you to lower your head, but in the end, time reveals everything. It reveals who we are and reveals who others are. And when I think about it, I think that perhaps the greatest courage is to remain true in a world that tries to shape you all the time. Thank you, really, for staying with me so far. Your company, even on the other side of the screen, makes this old heart feel less alone. If this story touched a little piece of you, leave me a like. For me, it's like a silent hug, one of those that warm up without needing any words. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, subscribe to the channel. It's like leaving the door ajar for the next visit. Also, tell me where you're watching from. I like to imagine every city, every house, every person who sits with me in these conversations. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Now, don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.